Hi, so the other day I started a Blender and just started playing around, and after about an hour, I don't know how, but I ended up with this. Now there's some interesting things happening here, so I thought maybe this makes a good tutorial. And if you're interested in making a intestine disgusting alien thing or whatever this is, then stick around, I will show you right here, right now. Alright, so I started with a curve. I have all the extra options here, so if you don't have them, just go to Edit Preferences, go to your add-ons, look for Extras, and then you have the Add Curve Extra Objects. And you just enable that. It comes with Blender, it's just not enabled by default. And then when you hit Shift A, you have Curve, and then you have all of these extra options here. And what I just did was I added an Archimedean spiral, and then we get some options down here. So for example, I can set this to 5 turns and then just bring up the height so that we get a nice looking spiral. Now this is a curve. We have curve options here. And then what I did was I just go to object mode. I added a icosphere just to start with. Then I added an array modifier. I set this to fit curve and then picked the spiral. So now the array modifier makes exactly as many copies basically of the object that the modifier is on to fit the length of the curve. But of course it's not following the curve. We have to add another modifier. We need the curve modifier and also select the spiral. And now we have this, and on the array I can bring down this relative offset here, and you can see the icosphere, which is this guy, is now copied along the curve multiple times, and it fits the length of the curve. So now I thought, well, this looks kind of cool if I shade this smooth, but wouldn't it be cool if this were metaballs and they melt together? Have you ever seen metaballs? They're really cool. So you hit Shift A, metaball, ball. And this isn't very exciting looking yet, but the magic happens when you have more than one. So if I hit Shift D, you can see this is the effect that metaballs, or actually all the meta objects has. So if I hit Shift D again, you know, we get this like almost like surface tension of a liquid effect. Now, if this is too jagged for you, and the resolution here isn't high enough, you can go to this special metaball tab here and then just set this to 0.2 as well, just like for the render. And then you have much higher resolution. You can see the effect really good here. So if I bring this closer, it starts to connect and then it sort of merges together, almost like subsurface. I don't know. There's not just balls, there's also capsules, planes, ellipsoids, and cubes, but it's always the same thing. As soon as it comes close to something else, some other meta object, then we get this cool effect. And I thought, well, this would probably look cool here. How about I just take a metaball and then apply the array modifier and the curve modifier just like it did with the icosphere. But there is a big problem here. Metaballs don't have modifiers. There is no modifier tab here, so I cannot simply add the array modifier and the curve modifier. That doesn't work. So we have to find another solution, and the other solution, of course, is animation nodes. So let's just clear all of these metaballs. Let's also get rid of the icosphere. Icosphere, delete. Okay, I'm just keeping the spiral for now. Now, I need one metaball though, okay? Put it in the center, scale it down. Okay, now I'm gonna split the screen. Set this to animation nodes. By the way, I do have an introduction series to animation nodes. And you can find that here on my YouTube channel. It's for beginners, so if you want to get started with animation nodes, it's a really, really awesome add-on. Link is down below, and there is also a playlist here on the channel. So you can just start at the beginning and learn everything about animation nodes, the nodes, the data types, you know, and how to set it up in loops and all of that. And of course, we'll be using some of this right here, right now. So I created a new node tree. Of course, I will go over here, always switch on these three options. They are explained in the tutorial series as well. Now I need to create multiple metaballs. So I need an object instancer node. And here I can define which objects. I'm going to take the M ball and let's just start with, I don't know, 50 instances. Right away, 50 instances are created. They are over here in the animation nodes objects container, which I will collapse because I don't need to look at that. And they're all in the same spot, so really not very special yet. I will have to figure out how to place those metaballs along my curve here. And I will have to do that, of course, using animation nodes. In animation nodes, there is a feature here in the spline options, which is called evaluate spline. And we can take a spline. So let's take our spiral. And then we have this parameter, which is basically the factor between 0 and 1, which would be the start and the end of the spline. And it evaluates the spline and gives us a location. So let's quickly visualize that with a 3D viewer, plug it into the location, maybe make it bigger. So up here you can see this is the location at parameter 0. And if I now increase this parameter, you can see it's evaluating the position of the spline. And then if this is set to 1, this will be the end of the spline. Okay, so we can use this evaluate spline node. Very cool. Now we have 50 metaballs and we want to place them along this spline. So we're going to need a loop. Okay, subprogram loop. Let's create a loop. And we're going to need an object list for the input of that loop. So inside of the loop now, we have each individual object, each metaball. Because I'm going to hit W, create invoke node, and plug my object list in here. So now inside of the loop, I'm going to use this evaluate spline node. I need a factor between 0 and 1 for this thing here, the parameter. So how do I get that? Well, the loop node gives me the index and it gives me the iterations. The iterations is the length of the list of objects that I'm plugging in. So basically all I need is a very simple math node set to divide. And then I'm going to divide the index by the iterations. And that's going to give me the factor between 0 and 1, right? First object, index 0, 0 divided by, what do we have, 50 instances is 0. And 50 or 49 divided by 50 will be the last position between 0 and 1. So now we have the location for each of those 50 instances. So we're taking the length of the spline, the whole length, dividing that by 50 positions, and then placing the metaball right there. And we have to do that by using a object transform output. Which object? Well, the metaball. Where we want to change the location, we want to place it here. Now you can see we have all of these weird circles, but no metaballs. And that is because the metaball is kind of a weird object. It has, it's like the ball is like the mesh data, and then it has this radius around it, so it's like two things. And to actually copy the entire metaball and create a real new metaball with the mesh and that radius, that influence radius, we have to simply enable copy full object. So we tick that right here, and then you can see we have 50 metaballs all along the spiral here. Now this doesn't look very interesting yet because they're not merging. So we just have to increase the number of metaballs and then we get this. So this looks much better. This looks cool. Let me just take that first metaball guy, this one here. Gonna move him out of the way. Yeah. Okay, so this is that. Now we have two things left. First, I want this to animate. I want this to kind of rotate or move along the spline. And then second, I also want to change the size of each meta ball to make it look even more disgusting or creepy. So let's first of all look at the animation. How can we animate this? Well, we're gonna have to animate this parameter. And animation is always based on the time info node. So we take the time info node. This gives us the frame number. So this is going to be a rather high number. If I simply take a math node, number math, and add the frame number to that, then this probably looks okay on the first frame. But if I hit play, they all just disappear and kind of end up here. They get stuck there because this is such a high number. I need to somehow slow down the animation basically. So how about another number? Math node, plug that in here and make this a factor and multiply it by 0.1. And now we get this, which is weird looking, because this is not quite correct. We want the factor and we want to add. Why is this set to multiply? This needs to be add, okay. But this is still much too fast. So set that down to something even slower. Still too fast. Another factor. Yeah, now it moves slowly. And if you want to make it look even more creepy, it might be even slower. Let's make it even slower. 0.5. Okay, so now we have a very slow moving animation, and you can see that this last meta ball here that started at the start of the spline is now moving up, and all the other ones of course are also moving up based on our frame number, but they're all getting stuck up here. They all end up here. That's not what I want. And I also want this spline down here. I don't want this to just leave and go away. So an easier solution for that is to add another math node. So number math, plug that in here and set it to modulo and set the b value to 1. And now you can see what does that do. This is modulo. I'm sure you know what it does. It calculates the rest of a division. So divide something by 1. Basically, if it's between 0 and 1, everything is okay. And if it's larger than 1, that will jump back down to 0. So that's what the modulo does. And you can see that's actually what happens. So the ball ends here, and as soon as it would be larger than 1, it appears down here. So this is what we have now. This is also a very good node to use if you want to create a looping animation. So for example, if you would animate this now for, I don't know how many thousands of frames you need at this speed for a meta ball to actually make it around once and then jump back down to get a real loop, you could use that modular node. Okay, so now this is what we have. It's kind of a bit slow. Let's make it a little bit faster. Okay, and now the second thing I want to do is I want to animate each meta ball should change its size a little. Now, if you don't want just jumping around, if you want smooth changes, smooth animations, you need to use something in animation nodes that is called the wiggle. There's a number wiggle, a vector wiggle, all sorts of wiggle nodes. And I'm gonna check it out now. How do we do this? So maybe down here, I'm gonna take a number. So here is the vector wiggle node. Where is it? Here. But the thing with that is it wiggles the X and the Y and the Z individually. I don't want that. I want one value and then use that for the changing the size in all 3 dimensions basically. So what I want is a number wiggle node, this guy. Now I'm going to change here. I have the object transform output. I can also change the size. And I can plug a vector in here. So I will need to combine a vector. And I can use the number wiggle node here for the X, Y, and Z. Alright, so let's plug that in. X, Y, Z. I need the time info, which I can use here, and plug that into the evolution. That makes the smooth animation of the size changes. And then what happens if I hit play? You can see, yep, it's changing the size, all right, but of course it's changing the size not for each metaball individually, but for all of them. And that is because I need to plug the index into the seed. Okay, so now we get a different wiggle for each metaball. So it looks like this, which is also kind of cool looking. But of course the amplitude is much too high here. I'm gonna set the amplitude to something very small, like 0.1. Okay, and then we get super tiny sizes. That's not what we want. We want to actually get maybe some number float, and then a number or we could just use a number math node actually. Plug that in here. Use that for here and here, and then we have an add. Where's add? Here. Okay, and we have a value down here that we can set to something that looks cool. And then we have basically it's 0.28 now, the size, and then we add a little bit, maximum of 0.1 amplitude, just to change the size slowly. If we want to change the speed of the size change here, the wiggle, we have the speed value here, but I think this looks pretty cool already. Okay, now some of the balls here get very large, so we even have some connections between the rows. If you don't want that, maybe set down the size basically, or play with the amplitude here so that they don't get too large. Or of course you can always go into the spiral and scale that up on the Z-axis a little, because remember the metaballs here are all following our spiral curve that we already have. Okay, now let me quickly save this before Blender crashes again. Right, now the spiral is interesting, but I think we can do better. Let's check something else out. Okay, so we have more curve options here. The extra curves that I showed you before, it comes with something called knots, and then there's the braid knot. And I think we can use that to make it look really like disgusting intestines things. Knots, braid knot. And then we get this. And we have options here, so we can change basically the height, which is called width. And then we have the radius. So let's make something that looks interesting. Okay, maybe I just do that. Okay, go into object mode, move it over. So this is what the braid knot looks like, okay? And this shift A curve knots, braid knots also adds a braid circle, which is just a circle that it extrudes along the knot. I don't need that, I just need the curve, so I delete the circle. And now I have this interesting curve. But if I go to edit mode, you can see that this looks a bit different. You might be familiar. Let me just shift A curve Bezier. You might be familiar with these kinds of curves, where you have the vertices, the control points that you can move around and rotate. And then you have those handles that you can scale and also rotate. And basically your curve always goes through those control points. And in between the control points, Blender interpolates according to those handles, right? So that would be the typical Bezier type of curve. And then there's also a NURBS curve. So what is that? So this is a NURBS curve. And if we go into edit mode now, we can see this bit of curve here is all generated out of these handles, right? So if I take that handle and extrude, and then maybe extrude again, this is the curve that we end up with. Okay, so it's just a different type of creating the curve. You can see that the curve doesn't ever basically go through one of the control points. So it's very different from the Bezier curve. It's just a different way of telling Blender to interpolate where the curve actually is, just using these handles here. And this braid knot, if we go into edit mode, is one of those NURB curves. You can see the curve is actually here, and it's based on these control points out here. And if I go in here now and take out the spiral and plug in the braid, you can see that if I hit play, nothing is happening. All of our metaballs are in the center of the scene here. And that is because this evaluate spline node doesn't work with those NURB curves. But of course there's an easy fix. First of all, let me place it back into the center. Scale it up a little, apply the scale. And then right click and select, where is it? Convert to mesh. So now in edit mode, we have vertices and edges. It is now a mesh. And now I would like to right click and convert to curve. But for some reason, this option isn't here, but it's in here. So we go to object, convert to curve. Now we have a curve again, right? So we have a curve tab. It is a curve. I can use this braid now, go to the first frame, and you can see that the metaballs are again following this new curve. Cool. But we're kind of missing the connection here, so we need more metaballs. Easy. Let's do 100. Does that look good? Looks awesome. And disgusting. Cool. Now I might want to slow it down a little. Where is my speed factor? Here. 0.5. Okay, now this looks cool. And each metaball is changing its size slowly. So it looks very organic and alien. Cool, so that is that. Let me save it quick. Now the last thing I want to show you is materials. How do we make this look like intestine? Really gross looking. So let's maybe bring this down a little. We're done with the animation nodes here. This is a very simple, easy loop. I'm gonna split the screen here, set this to rendered view. I am in using cycles here, of course. And I'm gonna set the world background to black. And right away bring in some lighting. So let's take an area light, rotate X90, place it somewhere like right here, scale it up, make it a little bit bluish. This is going to be our backlight, and give it some power. Now, of course, I'm also gonna need a camera. So, camera, rotate 90. Let's look through the camera at our disgusting thing. It's not very bright yet. So let's bring up our backlight here. Maybe switch off the overlays. Okay, so this is what that looks like. Now we're gonna need the material for this guy, but I also want another light, sort of a key light for this whole thing. I set this to disk and just move it up here, and also scale it up and bring up its power. Like so, maybe. Okay. Okay, we'll play with the lighting later. And now for the material. Let's check out the material. So I'm gonna switch this over to the shader editor, create a new material on this meta ball. Remember, this is the one that we are duplicating using animation nodes. And we're gonna turn this, make this like pink, like so. Turn down the roughness. No. Let's keep the roughness at 0.3 and give it a clear coat so that it looks kind of slimy. And for some reason, this is way not enough power. Let's see. Let's do 300 watts here, or maybe 200. And scale this guy up so we get a big backlight for this sort of edge lighting, rim lighting thing. And turn that up quite a bit. Okay. So it looks like this. Now for this material, the whole thing will look much better and much more organic as soon as we enable subsurface. So subsurface scattering, I just set it to 0.3. And then we're gonna need some subsurface color. And for that, I think I'm gonna take a texture Voronoi. The Voronoi texture is a very organic looking texture. And it looks like cells. It always reminds me of like bacteria in a petri dish. Okay, so we plug that in there. Now what does that look like when I animate it? Ah. Looks cool. Okay, and I'm gonna plug that into a converter color ramp. I'm gonna take this color and plug it in here and make it maybe even a little bit brighter. And then I'm also gonna plug it in here and make it darker and increase the contrast like so. Take this as the factor and this as the, let's look at it with Control Shift left click, which is the Node Wrangler add-on. Just enable it. And then it looks like this. Okay. Cool. And this is going to be our subsurface color. So we have the pink color, and then we have this in the subsurface slot. So what does that look like now? Does that look disgusting enough? Let's see, subsurface radius. This basically makes it red. So let's do this, bring this up a little. And then maybe set this to random walk, which should be a little bit faster. Okay, so now it looks like that. And what if we bring this radius down? Well, this is just trial and error now to make it look like something. Can we do something here? This is very dark. Let's try this. Okay. And it looks like that. Cool. Now, of course, you can also do some sort of texturing effect for the color on top. But I think we can call it done. We have this, we have it animated, we have a material assigned to it, very simple material. We have some light set, and it looks pretty disgusting. Alright, that's it guys, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a very simple, easy animation node setup. It's also a very simple material, but I'm sure you can come up with something much more disgusting looking, maybe green material with something dripping off of it or something. If you do, then please drop me a note on one of my socials. I would love to see what you come up with. The finished blend file is available over at patreon.com/chrisp. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you're safe and healthy. Thanks for watching. Chris P out.